Good morning, heads of school, respected IB diploma and career-related program coordinators, and esteemed educators. We are delighted to welcome you on behalf of the student community at Neve Academy, Bangalore, to the third Pan-India and South Asia IB program coordinators meet.
We are honored that our school has been chosen as the host for this momentous gathering. Our school's vision has always been to instill its students with skills that will allow them to navigate an ever-changing world. From the day that I stepped into Neve early years, almost 13 to 14 years ago, till today, my love for learning, my curiosity, and my values have been shaped by this school. The core values of love for reading, inclusivity, grit, honor, and grace are deeply ingrained in every single student at Neve, making sure that we are ready for the world out there.
Neve has always supported us by giving us opportunities to redefine our learning for ourselves, whether it be through the Neve Literature Festival that celebrates our collective love for reading, the leadership opportunities present in the student government, or any of the many other opportunities given to us. This year marks the 20th year of Neve's journey towards reshaping education in India, and we are very pleased to have you here today.
This meeting brings together heads and coordinators from across India and South Asia, intending to share best practices, explore solutions to the collective challenges our IB community faces, striving towards the same goal of educational excellence.
Your dedication and improvements to the IB curriculum create a learning culture that shapes who we are as students. For that, we thank you sincerely. We are confident that today's meet, led by the Pan-India Program Network chairs, will enrich the quality of IB programs regionally and globally. Once again, a very warm welcome to you all. We wish you a successful meet at Neve Academy.
The lighting of a lamp before an event symbolizes the triumph of knowledge over ignorance. The flame represents wisdom, dispelling the darkness of obstacles and ushering in a new beginning. Which is why we would now like to invite our esteemed guest, Ms. Kavita, the head of School of Neve, Dr. Sita Murthy, the vice president of the IB Heads Association, Mr. Rajesh Vasudevan, the secretary of the association, Mrs. Lakshmi Chetan, the diploma program network chair for Karnataka, Dr. Namita Agarwal and Ms. Naina Dhawan, the career program network chairs for India, Ms. Soumya Anil, the career program coordinator and SPOC for the event, and Mr. Rick Sims, our beloved keynote speaker, to join us on stage for the lamp lighting ceremony.
Yeah, put it outside. Yeah.
To welcome you, we now invite you to join us watch a Kathak recital to the mesmerizing tunes of the Ganesh Vandana and a harmonious choir performance performed by the students of Neve Academy.
या कुन्देन्दु तुषार हारधवला या शुभ्र वस्त्रान्विता या वीणा वरदण्ड ಮಂಡಿತಕರಾ ಯಾ ಶ್ವೇತ ಪದ್ಮಾಸನಾ ಯಾ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮಾಚ್ಯುತ ಶಂಕರ ಪ್ರಭೃತಿಭಿಃ ದೇವೈ ಸದಾ ವಂದಿತಾ ಸಾ ಮಾಂ ಪಾತು ಸರಸ್ವತೀ ಭಗವತಿ ನಿಶೇಷ ಜಾಡ್ಯಾಪಹ
I hope you all enjoyed that wonderful showcase. We would now like to invite the esteemed guests to be seated on the stage.
We now invite Ms. Kavita, our head of school, to say a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Sahasra. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Neve. It has taken 6 cohorts of DP graduates, especially since the first 3 graduated during the pandemic, for us to really find our stride with the DP. The key areas of finding the Madhyam Marg, or the middle path, for us have been the paradox of parent choices, the relentless pressure of students for perfection, the labor market for teachers, reconciling multiple stakeholder goals, and of course, institutional governance. They come together because of the complexity of DP offering, not just subjects, but also EE, TOK, and CAS, and so much else. Later today, we are also doing a parent session on some of this, and the first question that was sent to us is, when will CAS officially start? Followed by, how much time will the kids be given to brainstorm ideas for CAS? You've heard that before. This is grade 11 parents. Can't blame them. If we find this so hard, imagine their plight. Kids want to do well, parents want perfect kids, teachers want balanced lives and fair compensation. Culture building in an organization we know takes 30 years, and how do you do that with a revolving door? Leadership wants data from all of you. Admission, recruitment, attendance, assessment, subjects, the kids, teacher performance, student feedback, deadlines, current data, comparative data, benchmark data, and criteria-based patterns. Data also shows us that there's no alignment between MYP and DP results. And yet the MYP is perfect for the DP program. What do we do with that? And then there is the CP. Do it all, but for alternate pathways, and still get the kids into good colleges. Easy peasy. Day before yesterday, Rick was running this session for our kids, our grade 12, where he had them choosing from multiple experiences of a math experiment and labeling 6 stages: data, information, knowledge, insight, wisdom, and impact. There were so many diverse perspectives on what is knowledge and what then is wisdom. We didn't quite get to impact. T.S. Eliot's words came to my mind. Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? But in the words of my best friend, who I never met, the Buddha, also came to mind, Atma Deepo Bhava. He must have been talking about our kids. Them. You are the upholders of the most important and impactful craft known to mankind, because your daily lives offer a chance to live up to Jonas Salk's challenge of being good ancestors. If life for kids, parents, teachers is the perfect storm, finding the eye and guiding the community through it, delivering the kids not just through boards, but from school to college is what you do. For every child that wants only 3 subjects from the plethora that you must offer, for every parent who wants their child only to apply to Ivy Leagues, you deliver happy, curious, self-aware, motivated, disciplined, and passionate kids. Kudos. Your challenges are opportunities. My grandmother often said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's in one of the bookmarks in your bags. Kudos to the IB Heads Association for putting this together, for you to be together. I'm looking forward to today because I know a soft heart goes with your strong minds and thoughtful choices. Welcome to a day together at Neve.
Thank you, Ms. Kavita. We would now like to invite Dr. Sita Murthy, the Vice President of the Association and the Chair of the South and East region, to initiate us into this day.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. While listening to Kavita Gupta, what came to my mind, I'm sure Dr. Cyrus Vakil also would have thought of it. In economics, there's a theory called the prisoner's dilemma. Perhaps we need to have a DP dilemma in theory. I hope, Dr. Cyrus, you will script the new dilemma that the DP practitioners go through across the world, not just in India. Happy to see all of you. Thank you, Kavita Gupta, for hosting this event. As the IB Heads Association, I would like to give you a little background into who we are, what we do. It was registered as a formal association in 2018 as a Heads Association. Like you know, IB is always very particular about inclusivity. So we started looking at how do we make sure that our coordinators also get together. And that's how 3 years ago this idea was born, that let's have in the month of August, because that's when the schools start, towards the third week of August, one Saturday, if all the coordinators get together at one place and have a lot of learning together, it might be very useful for the rest of the academic year. So this is the third edition of the coordinators meet. So I must tell you, in Mumbai right now, the MYP event would have started. In Noida, the PYP event would have started. And to all of you, I'd like you all to know that this is going to be an annual practice now. After today also I'm sure it'll be a successful edition, but 3 successful editions, I'm sure it's going to be one good professional development platform for the IB practitioners in India. So our IB Heads Association has 3 regions, the North region, the South and East. These 2 are combined because in the East we still don't have many IB schools, so South and East, and then we have the West. So for the South and East, myself and Rajesh Vasudevan, head of the Manchester School, we in Coimbatore, the 2 of us take care, along with Seema Sapru from Calcutta, from the Heritage School. In the North, Rohit Bajaj, the head of, the director of Pathways Gurgaon, takes care of it. And in the West, Abhimanyu Basu from Dhirubhai Ambani, he takes care of the Western region. But together, all of us take care of the Pan-India Heads Association. Every year in February, the heads meet. Next year, we are going to meet in Coimbatore, the Heads Association, in Kodaikanal. And I need to tell you, IB is 50 years old in India by next February. It's something all of us should be celebrating, okay? With almost 300 IB schools in India now, I think we are a big force to reckon with, and IB also appreciates that. And I'm sure all of you know that the global conference is planned for all of us to attend in Mumbai, so they're coming to India next time. This is the second time they're coming to India, I think. First, they came to Hyderabad many years ago, and now it's in Mumbai next year. I do hope to see all of you. Why did I give you the entire background? I do hope that some of the coordinators sitting here in next year or 2 years from now, I'll meet you as the heads of IB schools, and you need to know how the fraternity of IB within India, how we are building, and we are trying our best to make sure that our schools are robust with energy, with the IB. You know, there's a question Suman Sethi once asked in the last year conference. Are you offering an IB program or are you an international school? It's a good question for all of us to think. I thank all the presenters who are sitting here for taking time, working on presentation to make everybody's time worth its while, because having traveled from length and breadth of the country, whatever you take away from today should benefit the students in your classrooms. So on that note, I'd like to invite Lakshmi Chetan, the network chair for Karnataka, and Dr. Namita, co-chair of CP for India. Naina Dhawan, I don't know if Naina, please come on to the stage. So Naina Dhawan and Dr. Namita take care of the CP in India right now as the co-network chairs. Okay. So the 3 of them helped a lot in working with the presenters, seeing how it can be useful for all the participants who attend the event. The certificates, by the way, for every participant is very meticulously planned. But just like you know, Murphy's Law, just when you think that you have got it right, something has to go wrong. So some of the certificates could be quite, the name could be something, the school could be something, so don't worry. Whatever you feel you need, that needs to be addressed, leave a note at the registration desk in the afternoon. We'll take care of that. If we took care of so many things, I'm sure we can take care of that too. So Lakshmi, can you please introduce the presenters?
Good morning, everyone. For the first session, that is between 10:05 to 10:55, we have Dr. Anthony. May I request the presenters to please stand up when I call your name? Thank you so much. Dr. Anthony, Mr. Omkar, and Ms. Divya, Mr. Nimish and Ms. Sejin, Ms. Pratiksha, and for the CP, can I?
The two of them.
So for the CP, it's myself, Dr. Namita Agarwal, and Ms. Naina Dhawan. We will be together presenting the first session. The second one would be by Ms. Prasija Nambiar. Are you there, Ms. Prasija? Yeah. Ms. Aruna Mudana, and Mr. Sumit Chopra, and Ms. Anshul Fanda. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. The details of the sessions are posted outside. So if you have registered for one of the session but you have changed your mind and you want to attend some other session, please go ahead and look into that details, and then you can attend according to the classroom that is allocated there. These are the first session presenters, which is from 11:05 to 11:55. Please be seated. And for the second session, which is 12:15 to 1:05, we have Mr. Husifa. He's behind. Ms. Smita, and Mr. Rajesh, and Ms. Priya. Right. And for the third session, we have Ms. Tahira, Ms. Uma, Ms. Nikita, and yeah, that's it. Right. And the last session is where we have DPC meet, which is room 1 and room 2. We have 2 years and below DP coordinators who will be led by Mr. Husifa again. And DPC 2, room number 2, 2 years and above will be by Dr. Anthony. Yeah. Thank you.
We sent out a Google form to all of you to register for the session that you would like to attend. We have the data, but more than anything, the seating arrangement is what, the logistical arrangement is what we looked at. All the venues, fortunately, the school managed to have more than 50 people to be seated there. But make sure that you attend most of the sessions and take the best from them. The DPC coordinators meet. This is in every event that we are having today. We have a coordinators meet where you have your questions and answers and discussions and, putting minds together to make sure whatever prisoner's dilemma that we have right now could probably be answered. And I do hope you'll take the best of it. On that note, I'll request my friend Rajesh to gift a memento on behalf of the association to the host school. We'll hand it over to Kavita Gupta first. And of course, to the network chairs, because they really toiled hard to make sure that this event comes together and there's a qualitative takeaway for every participant. So, Rajesh, I'll request you to hand over the mementos from the association to Dr. Namita, Lakshmi Chetan, and Naina Dhawan. And to the handsome keynote speaker who's sitting on the stage, the association would like to appreciate after the keynote. All right? Okay. Yeah, we'll give it. Okay. So on that note, I think we're ready for the keynote now. All of us will come back and join you in listening to the wonderful speaker. I'm sure the anchors will introduce the keynote speaker. While that's getting ready, I must tell you, I'm the timekeeper of the day today. So I'm always looking at the watch, so don't think that I'm impatient. I'm only doing it because I want to make sure that your time is well spent here.
It is our great pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, Mr. Rick Sims, a scholar and educator who has shaped the theory of knowledge landscape for more than 3 decades. With experience as a teacher, senior examiner, workshop leader, curriculum designer, and co-author of one of the subject's most widely used textbooks. He has helped generations of students navigate the uncertainties of knowledge in a complex, fast-changing world.
He holds degrees in mathematics and music from Oxford, Warwick, Liverpool, and the Royal Conservatoire in The Hague, as well as a PhD in philosophy of mind and cognitive science from the University of Exeter. His research spans fascinating areas such as minimal cognition, plant cognition, and distributed cognition in social contexts.
He isn't just an academic, though. Beyond the classroom and lecture hall, he is also a composer of electroacoustic music, an avid synthesizer programmer, and the keyboardist for the jazz fusion band Some Funk Junk.
Please join us in welcoming a true pioneer in the field of theory of knowledge and a lifelong explorer of the intersections between reason, creativity, and wonder. We present to you Mr. Rick Sims.
To live up to that introduction, I'll do my best, but it's very flattering. Thank you so much. I need a mobile microphone because I'm a teacher, and teachers, as you know, get many steps during the day, but only 5 at a time, don't they? So thank you very much. I am massively honored to be standing here in front of you. It's, for me, a wonderful journey. My IB journey is still continuing. I consider myself to be a lifelong learner. And it's a learning journey. In Neve, they have these learning journeys, and I was really thinking about the learning journey that I have been doing. And what I want to do is to share some thoughts with you today. But first, I want to thank Neve for inviting me. I've learned from the wonderful staff they have here. Really very, very special, engaged, very bright, very creative, and always willing to learn. I've learned from my wonderful host here, Kavita, and her wonderful husband who is standing here. I've learned so much. And most of all, I've learned from these guys. We've been together now for a couple of days, gradually getting to know the Year 12s. I had a session with the Year 11s as well, but most of my work was with the Year 12s, and I have to say, I've learned so much from you, and I just want to thank you for the job you're doing now, but also for the engagement that your whole class showed for the last 2 days. So a round of applause, please, for Neve Year 12s. Okay, I think we've been sitting down for too long, don't you? So we're going to play a little game, and don't worry, it's not anything embarrassing. The game is to stay standing for as long as possible, right? And I am going to be asking you questions, and if you answer no to any of the questions, you have to sit down. And once sat down, you can never, ever stand up again. Do you understand the rules? Because we're dealing with IB coordinators here, you know, and they know about rules. But they also know how sometimes to get around rules, don't they? So it's a real pleasure to be in front of IB coordinators and CP people. CP, let's not forget CP. I think what I'm going to be saying today is really important from the CP perspective, actually. Maybe even more than the IB perspective. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. So I need my crib sheet here. Oh yes, and there's one more thing we need to do. You're teachers. And I've noticed with teachers that they have, in a sense, all the characteristics of students, good, but also bad, but 10 times worse, yeah? So we're going to be doing some audience participation at some point, and you're going to be discussing, and I need to have a way of stopping you right now discussing things. And because these are TOK questions, they are open-ended, which means we could discuss for the whole day. And that will be unfortunate because there are so many really interesting sessions planned, so I don't want to run into those. So I have to cut the sessions short, I have to cut the discussion short, even when it's getting really interesting, and I really apologize for that, but that's the nature of the beast with TOK. Now, in order to stop the discussions, I am going to use this wonderful singing bowl, and I obtained that from the German musical instrument company Thomann, but that's not an advert. So it's not actually an original one. And it goes like this. So should we just try a practice session? Yeah, please talk to your neighbor, introduce yourself. Talk loudly. Let's talk. Come on, talk. Come on, talk. That is really not very good, is it? When you hear that bell, you must stop. Now, I did this with the students, and the students are better than you. The year 11s are the winners so far. The year 12s come second, and you guys are, I'm afraid, an atrocious third. Shall we try again? When you hear the bell, you've got to stop. Talk. I said to the students, it's a bit like Squid Games, this, really. Okay, wonderful. So, the standing exercise then. So please, could you stand up? If you're able to stand up, please do so. So stay standing if you answer yes to the following question, and if you answer no, you have to sit down and forever sit down. Stay standing if you said, I don't know the answer to that question in one of your classes over the last week. So you've all said that. Very good. You've got to be honest, right? Honesty is really an important part of it's not in the learner profile, but it's implied by it. So stay standing if you've changed your mind about something this week. Very good. Because think about it, our business is changing minds, isn't it? Including our own. Stay standing and be honest with me. Stay standing if this week you have not followed a lesson plan that you planned because something more interesting happened in class. Excellent. You're all doing really well. I don't have enough prizes for all of you, right? Stay standing if this might eliminate a lot of people here. Stay standing and be really honest with me if you have introduced some physical object into one of your classes over the last week. Yeah, that's what I thought. Sit down and enjoy the seated pleasure. Stay standing if you think that knowledge is not just about factual correctness. Stay standing, and this is a really tricky one. Stay standing if you think that a good explanation doesn't necessarily have to be true. I mean, let's face it, all chemistry and physics teachers should be standing still because of the solar system model of the atom, for example, right? Right? Isn't that interesting? We're teaching lies, aren't we? Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? We're going to come back to that. Stay standing if you think that knowledge is more of a process than a thing. Excellent. Stay standing if you think that a sports person or a crafts person or a musician has knowledge of their sport, their craft, their music. That's knowledge. Just think about the school curriculum in the light of your answers there. Okay, this is an interesting one, and this is definitely from my generation. Stay standing if you could deliver a whole 1.5-hour class out on the car park without any visual aids, computers. Oh, you're all very confident here. Well, the last question is a bit of a cheeky question. But stay standing if you think that Tottenham Hotspur is the best team in the world. I was thinking of saying whether that should be Indian cricket team or the English cricket team. Thank you all very much. Well done. Give yourselves applause. So that's setting the scene a little bit. My talk is a talk, but it's also with a lot of audience, thinking. So my talk is in sort of three major parts, or three unequal parts, a bit like a Cellini salt cellar. We'll do a quick refresher on TOK, and especially why TOK, because that's my particular interest. Why TOK? And of course, this is interesting for the IB coordinators and the heads, but CP, you might be thinking, well, what's this got to do with me? I'll tell you that at the beginning of the CP, I was invited in as a consultant to think about how we could have a sort of TOK kind of unit in the CP. And of course, it's evolved a little bit from that, from our original plans. But it's all very interesting. Critical thinking and that type of thing that we associate with TOK and creative thinking is very much in the CP. And although I'm not directly going to refer to that, you'll see that some things I'm doing today definitely get you thinking about what the parallels are. Then I'm going to give you two puzzling problems, and I'm going to get you to think about it, maybe discuss it in small groups. I know this is not ideal for sort of discussion, but maybe discuss it with your neighbours. And then I do actually want to hear what you think the solutions are to those problems. And I don't want to spend too much time on that. And then I'm going to do a little tiny bit of a lecture, and I apologise for the lecturing bit, but hopefully introduce some interesting ideas. And then we might come back to those problems, and we might come back to TOK, and we might come back to CP, and at the very end, you'll have an opportunity, hopefully, if I get my timing right, to ask some questions. Yeah, so that's the plan. So let's just start off with TOK. And I call it a 5-minute refresher. Why TOK? What's the point of it? So the first thing to observe is that there are many different kinds of knowledge. So obviously, mathematical knowledge, which is a skill, isn't it? Isn't it a shame that we have this distinction between knowledge and skills? I actually don't make that distinction. As a philosopher and cognitive scientist, I don't think there is any difference. There you go. I'm showing you my cards already. I think that is an unfortunate distinction. And it means that sometimes people with skills are treated in a different way to people with knowledge, bookish kind of knowledge. And think about the inequalities in society that leads to. I think that lady there, cricketer, she has knowledge. Of course, books are a wonderful repository of knowledge, and I'm looking at Kanish here. And then, of course, a nurse or a doctor in a surgery or in a clinic has a vast amount of knowledge, probably of both types, so bookish knowledge, but also knowing how to do things. And then a big idea is that knowledge is a performance. It's not just a thing. So that's why I asked that question in the introduction. We do knowledge. It's a shame that English is such a bad language. Have you noticed that? It's a poverty-stricken language because we don't really have a continuous noun for knowledging. Don't interrupt me now, I'm knowledging. Yeah? Because it's an ongoing process, do you not think? It's an ongoing thing. And I think the whole IB ethos is that knowledge is something that continues, and it's not just a thing that you get from school and it's in your briefcase and you walk away from school. So all of these, I would say, incorporate knowledge. Playing the piano, playing cricket. Notice cricket has featured twice already in 2 slides. Even doing chemistry. I mean, obviously you need to know things like chemical formulae, but there is some physical, performative aspect to doing chemistry, I would be hopeless as a chemist. Acid will get spilled everywhere, you know. You should have seen my lab coat at school. I mean, it was burnt and it had acid, you know, with holes in it. And then building a plane. Building a plane is a performance, isn't it? And we know if it's successful or not, don't we? Because the plane doesn't fly if it's not. One kind of knowledge could be thought of as a map. So here we have a representation, and you can see it's a highly simplified representation of a complex world. And the emphasis on simplified is, I say that with massive emphasis. It's because the map is simple that we can use it. Students very often think that the more detailed the map is, the better it is. But look, I get lost in Bengaluru. I get lost here. So to have a map that is as detailed as Bengaluru is ridiculous. I would get lost with that map as well. What makes that map useful is its very falseness, in a way. The fact that that map is simplified. I would say that's a good metaphor for knowledge. Right? Our knowledge is not as complex as the world, and nor should it be. Moreover, it's made by us in order to do things in the world. This is what I call the TOK sandwich. In Sweden, where I live, it's really complicated to explain this, because in Sweden, sandwiches, to my shock and horror when I first went there, sandwiches have just 2 layers. I think that's not fair. A sandwich should have 3 layers, right? Agree? Do you agree? Right, I'm going to tell them. I'm going to say 200 coordinators say that you're wrong. Complex real world. Simplification. Now, when I show this to students, they say that's maths, that's not a simplification. But it is a simplification, right, of the complex real world. And then what does TOK do? TOK is asking questions about knowledge. Yeah, so notice that your subjects that you teach are about the world, but not TOK. And that's why students find it hard. TOK is about the knowledge of the world. We call that second-order thinking, and it's hard. You know, I've been teaching TOK for 30 years, roughly speaking, and I still find it hard. And that's what makes it fun, too, as well. And of all the things I've taught, it's the most challenging. And you might be noticing that TOK is symbolized by an empty classroom. I don't know quite what the significance of that is. So let's go back to maps then. That's one kind of knowledge, but it's an important kind. And you know, maps have characteristics. So here we have the MacArthur's Universal Corrective Map of the World. And you see that India is nice, fairly central there. And Northern Europe is in the bottom right corner, exactly where it should be, if you ask me. And maps are produced for a purpose. So you have different maps for the same territory. So that means that maps, in a sense, have a perspective built into them. We make different maps for doing different things. Think of the analogy with knowledge. That means we make different knowledges for doing different things about the same world. These maps use specific methods to create them, depending on their purpose. They use conventions. They map different features of the world. And think about the concepts that we use in our subject areas. We have different concepts to pick out those features. I'm going to say a little bit more about conceptual learning in a moment. This is really important about maps, is that they ignore things. They leave things out. Like I said before, they're simple. They are true if they serve their purpose. So imagine, you know, a map of the Paris metro. That map is true if it serves the purpose of getting me around Paris. And they cannot be value-free, as I'm trying to indicate with this map here. By definition, maps always encompass a perspective, and that's values. But that's not a bad thing. We need perspectives. You can't look at the world without a perspective. And sometimes students use the term bias, but I don't like that term because it implies it's negative. Perspectives are important. We need our perspectives. We just have to recognize that we have different ones. And we have to make a serious attempt to understand the perspective of others. For me, that's what international mindedness is. It's two things. It's understanding your own perspective and allowing yourself to be critical of that perspective, but also trying to understand others, and also being critical of others' perspectives as well. Right? So criticism, critique is okay. That's the essence of critical thinking, the essence of this kind of education. Keep that in mind. It's a really important point. And of course, there can be different maps of the same territory, and they also can be right. And we've heard that before somewhere, haven't we? Yeah. We did this with the students in the year 12s recently, the idea that knowledge has gatekeepers. And those are people or institutions that control the access to that knowledge. And we also discussed, I think, was it with the year, no, it's the year 11s I did this with. That's right. And they also told me that, you know, those gatekeepers, sometimes they're necessary. They gave the example of, you know, their bank details. Obviously, they want to gatekeep those, and rightly so. Yeah? They told me that the government maybe wants to gatekeep certain information about military plans and strategies. Absolutely right. Yeah? So gatekeeping isn't always bad, but we still should be aware of it, especially gatekeeping like linguistic gatekeeping. So, for example, literacy. Who we allow to be literate in our societies. Because if a lot of knowledge is coded into words, then who we allow to be literate is also who we allow to have access to knowledge. And that's, of course, where schools come in. So why TOK? Well, because each of us is concerned with knowledge. And these aspects we've been talking about concern our everyday doings in school. But also, I think that these second-order issues we're talking about, and I'm going to say a few things about that now, will inform our teaching. Yeah? And I think that's, if I have one big message, it is, I've got two big messages, but the first one is, if you're TOK aware, and if you want to be sensitive to TOK things, it doesn't mean doing anything extra in class. What it means is just being aware of what things you normally do are actually very TOK rich. And perhaps helping the TOK department will be sometimes throwing in a bit of vocabulary that will allow students to join things up. Because, you know, knowledge doesn't necessarily have these divisions, but schools have these divisions, and I understand why, for administrative purposes and so on. But, you know, maybe for me, it's a long time since I was in school, and looking at the perspective from a student's point of view, you know, you're doing these 6 subjects in the IB plus the other things. That's quite bewildering, in a way, especially when the concepts don't seem to match up, when knowledge in English literature seems to be a bit different from knowledge in chemistry. So TOK is trying to make that link and say, well, actually, they're the same thing in a way, although there might be different kinds of knowledge. Yeah, so TOK is a sort of glue, in a way, to try and glue things together. I just mentioned this now, you know it, right? So I'm preaching to the converted. 2 assessment tasks in TOK, 1,600-word essay, and the exhibition. I'm not going to say anything about the essay today. And I'm not going to say anything about the exhibition. But I am going to be talking about objects for the rest of this talk. Yeah? And the exhibition is about 3 objects linking them to a knowledge question. And that's why I asked the question about how many of you use objects in your teaching? Material objects, yeah? And, you know, we did that question, and a lot of you said yes. So you would also be helping the TOK project to be aware of the material nature of knowledge. And that's what I want to speak about in a moment. First, some problems. So this is for you to think about. It's a very interesting study done quite a long time ago now by some psychologists, Lev, very famous psychologist. And they did a really interesting comparison. There was a class of adult maths class and in America, in California. And they monitored the people in the maths class doing certain problems. And they also had walked around. I don't know quite how they did this. Psychologists are very interesting, but they followed them around the shops doing the same kind of calculations in the supermarket. And there was a difference, right? 57% got the correct answer in the class, but with the same kind of problem in the supermarket, 90% got them right. So that's the first question mark, yeah? I'm going to ask you why. The second puzzle is very similar, but it's with children. So these are social psychologists, Sachs. They studied, in this paper, they studied children selling various things on an open market in Brazil. And this is so typical of psychologists. They posed as customers, and they asked for certain product combinations. Psychologists do this. If you want to know about deception, just have a look at how psychologists work. Anybody here a psychologist? You see you're not admitting it. Good. Be proud. Put your hand up. Yeah, good. Yeah. It's always interesting, informed consent. Well, how informed can it be? It can't be too informed, otherwise it would wreck the experiment, right? You agree? Interesting TOK problem there. How far do we go with the informed consent? So they posed as these customers and they asked them problems, and the kids got them 99% of the time right. Now, the same children in class, doing a maths class, asked the same problems. So this is even more precise than the previous study. And they only got 65% right. Now, you have 5 minutes to talk to your neighbor and to solve, it's basically one puzzle, isn't it? Why? Why does this happen? Talk to your neighbor, 5 minutes. I'm going to ring the bell, and then the students with microphones are going to walk around, and you're going to offer me a few solutions. I'm going to apologize straight away and say that I won't be able to listen to all of your solutions. There's 200 people here. But I will listen to hopefully a representative sample, and I will make notes on it as well, which I will also share with you afterwards. And then we will move on. Yeah? So 5 minutes, starting now. What do you think, students? Are they any good? Good. So let's spend just 5 minutes or so just discussing your ideas about this. Put your hand up if you would like to just offer a thought. It doesn't have to be a complete explanation, because obviously this is a complex issue, but a thought, and then a student will come with a microphone and I'll try and make notes.
Okay, I think we discussed 3 points around it.
Give me one.
So it was about something that they've been practicing again and again. It was their comfort zone. So they had been doing that regularly, so you don't need to, so they had much, and we know that the practice makes it perfect kind of a thing. So because they had that, error and trial going on, and then they reached that level. And being able to apply what they'd learned over, it made it more comfortable for them. So being in a comfort zone, I guess.
That's 2 points.
Thank you.
I'll just give one
One
phrase.
moment. Let me do one thing at a time. Yep. So I just want to respond to that a little bit. Never ask coordinators for 1 point, because they'll give you at least 2, right? So are you saying that they don't practice their mathematics at school then?
not like application in terms of they're not applying it. So it's constrained kind of a thing, you know. So we say, like in the school also, we say that if you give them, assessment which is in their strength, then they perform better. Maybe they don't get that opportunity to showcase it in their strength area.
Thank you. 3 points she's got now, right? Brilliant. I told you, 3 points. Thank you. Yeah.
So being a math and a TOK person, I would like to say it is only the difference between abstraction and reality. Helping them to relate with physical things makes a difference.
Wait a minute. Okay, thank you. So the question is raised, and notice the question is not begged. Please tell your students that it's the difference between begging a question and raising a question, right? So raising a question means asking one, begging one means making a circular argument, assuming the answer, yeah? So raising the question, why do we teach abstract stuff in maths classes at school then? If it's easier to do it the real way. I'm not asking you that, I'm just saying, you know, why do we do that? Please contemplate that, because we do that, and I think we do it for a reason. But think about what is that reason, if it makes it harder. Yeah? Thank you. Did you want to? No? Thank you.
I feel... Sorry.
First this lady here, and then you're second. Yeah?
I think there's also a fear of assessment, perhaps. That has been the psychological aspect. When you're in a practical setting, that's your comfort zone, like she said. In a classroom, there tends to be a pressure where you're put under a lens. Or students feel that they've been put under a lens, rather.
But don't you think that when you're selling something, you're under a certain amount of pressure? I mean, your whole living depends on it. So isn't that pressure as well? I'm not disagreeing, but I'm just, you see, I'm being a bit TOK-ish, right? And you know the TOK thing is to be a bit argumentative. But, you know, I can see what you're saying. There's pressure in school, but there's also pressure outside school. So that alone can't be the only factor. Yeah, but it's a good idea. There's some pressure. And I can imagine you say, well, they're worried about being assessed and judged. Well, if they get the price wrong, and at the end of the day there's a discrepancy, they're going to be judged too. And they might lose their job. And that's quite serious. So there's pressure there. Gentleman at the back.
Yeah. I feel they care more about their profit. In the first setup, it is a first-hand experience. In the second setup,
Right.
I feel they are just doing it for...
They're more invested.
Yep.
Yes, they might well be. Yeah, that's plausible. That is plausible. And then we're dealing with motivation, aren't we? So it's a motivational issue. So then the question would be, I'm so glad I'm not the only person who does that stuff. I can reveal, did you notice when you arrived at the school today, there's these beautiful, wonderful flower patterns everywhere, and the one at the front of the school was disrupted. And some stupid person must have walked into that. You know? You know who that stupid person was? And the reason was a good reason. I was talking to a lovely lady who was catching my eye and talking to me, and I was not looking where I was going. So I think that's a good reason. I like the investment point, yeah. So that speaks to teachers motivating, especially when it seems to be getting a bit abstract. Might be the question, okay, why do we do this? And I still want you to think about, why do we do that? Why do we do this abstract stuff? Yes? Next, gentleman over here.
Hello, this is Rajarao. The difference between these two cases is something based on the freedom of creative thought. In the first scenario, where the street children are selling the goods on the street, they are creating their own method. They have freedom of thinking as to how to calculate, where when they're in the classroom, they are confined by certain methods. I wouldn't say bookish methods, but the methods. Perhaps that freedom is making them think faster when they're on the street side and doing most of the calculations right. Whereas in the classroom, there perhaps those ideas are given as to how to solve the method calculations, do the calculations. So they're confined to go by those calculations rather than creating their own thoughts, perhaps.
So you're saying it's a freedom issue, are you? Is it to do with
Creativity.
freedom, that they have more freedom? Okay.
Yeah.
Do they have more freedom? I mean, in the classroom, at least I used to be a maths teacher back in the days, and I don't remember dictating how to solve a problem. I would just throw the problem out and say, okay, do this any way you can. Let's see how you can do it. And let's see how many different ways we can find of doing it. But I agree. I mean, there are some freedoms, they're limited freedoms, but there are limited freedoms on the street as well. I mean, you can't just use any way to calculate it, just like you can in the classroom. So I find that mysterious a little bit. I'm just thinking, I can't see that one should be more free than the other, but I can imagine that a classroom where they say, you've got to do it this way, which is what you have in mind, is that right? You've got to do it this way. This is the way of doing it. I can imagine that would be problematic. But I can also imagine that, imagine the person who runs the shop saying, look, this is the way you calculate this as well. So I'll leave it there. Just because I write it down here doesn't mean I agree with it, but I think it's nice to have a lot of suggestions. I think there's some interesting ones so far, and we'll do two more, and then, so at the back, please.
Hello.
Right at the very far back, there, that one there. Sorry, I'm dictating here. This is not a democracy, right? It's just I feel the back row should get looked at because they're really far away.
This reminds me of a very problematic question last year, if you remember, reconciling the demands of generalization and specialization. So I think that's something to do with that, because when there's knowledge which is generalized, it becomes rather easy for us to apply it. And when it's in the classroom setting, it's more specific and more specialized. And I think that's the transition from that is where the problem lies.
Ooh. Okay, so you saw I was agreeing with you, 90% of what you were saying, and at the very last moment, you said something I wasn't expecting. So you think it's more specific in the classroom, do you? You can answer, yeah.
It is, the expectation is more specialized, because then we have to follow a particular,
All right.
you know,
It's a little
form.
bit like the gentleman said over here.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think you're onto a good thing, but not that last thing, right? I might reverse it. I'm not going to say more than that, because I want you to think, this leads into conceptual thinking, doesn't it? Because those kids were selling particular goods, like one good, and they were selling it physically. Yeah? They weren't doing general problems. They were selling one good and selling certain multiples of it. That's all they were doing. Whereas in the classroom, that's not all what they're doing, right? So that's why I'm just pushing back a little bit and saying, isn't it the other way around? Don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say one thing or the other. We have time for one more. There was somebody waiting over here, I think.
Can I say here?
Whoever's got the microphone,
Here.
speak.
Can I say here?
Yeah, where are
Here.
you? Put your hand up.
Here. In the front. Yeah, so in my opinion, many of us are being teaching in the class in a way like learning first and doing next. But in the second one, the children were doing first and learning then. So that if that is changed, like then things can be different.
Okay. By the way, do you understand my notes? Because you're going to get them later, and they're going to look really mysterious, right? But learning first, doing second in the classroom. That's what you're saying, yeah? That's interesting. Of course, what's interesting is whether your colleagues agree with you. And maybe we should be doing more in the classroom. I don't know. Okay, fantastic. I think give yourselves a round of applause. These are excellent answers. Now, what's going to happen now will appear to be, to begin with, a bit of a non sequitur, but hopefully you're going to see the connection. So in Sweden, I live in Sweden, I'm a philosopher, and one of my fellow philosophers in Sweden is a cognitive science philosopher, Bo Dalbom. And he said, just as you can't do much carpentry with your bare hands, there's not much thinking you can do with your bare mind or your bare brain. And I think that's right. I think we use lots of tools for thinking, and those are material tools. So my talk is going to be about from thinking with objects to knowing with objects. And this is right, this is an ideal plan. And you know what lesson plans are like. You just told me, you don't follow them. And it's a bit like a lesson plan. I might not follow it. So I apologize if I don't follow it exactly. But my rough plan is to go through thinking with objects, how do we use them? If we have time, a little bit of history. I might skip that, actually. And then knowledge, objects and power, and some challenges, which might include artificial intelligence, at least generative artificial intelligence. If you have a look at the pictures, you see that we do use objects to think with. I mean, you could argue that the sculptor over here is thinking with her hands and also with the clay that she's using. We had a very interesting conversation last night about when you're writing something, you're interacting with what you've written so far. Very few of us can compose an essay in our heads. There's a wonderful Borges short story about a guy facing a firing squad, and he just wishes that he'd written his novel. That we all have a novel inside us. And he's facing the firing squad, and he wishes that he'd written that novel before he dies. And then suddenly, everything is frozen, and time doesn't move on for the others, but for him, he's standing there, and he has a year in which he composes his novel in his head. And he uses the faces of the soldiers who are pointing guns at him as characters in his novel. And the moment that he puts the final full stop, they shoot. It's a wonderful short story. If you don't know Borges, Argentinian writer, please read him. He's fantastic. He's translated all into lots of different languages, almost certainly into Indian languages as well as English. But we're not like that, really, are we? That's what makes that story so remarkable. When we write essays, we don't write the whole essay here and then splurge it out as though we're like a human printer. We are interacting with the draft as we go along, and so are students. And that's material. That's a material tool in front of us. So we're thinking with our half-written essay, just like she is thinking with the half-sculptured sculpture. But there are other objects that we think with. See that one at the top, that long one? Now be honest with me, who recognizes that? You see, you're so young. You guys are so young. Does that mean that I'm the oldest one here? It's possible, right? It's possible. So that's called a slide rule, and that's what we used at school. We walked around with slide rules and we did calculations with them. And you could tell who the maths geeks were because they had a slide rule in the pocket. And you could tell the engineers or the ones from engineering families because they had a really super duper one in their pocket. And the art students, you could tell them because they just, what's it my daughter says? They pimped their slide rule. They did like artistic things on it so you couldn't really use it, which is what my daughter does to her school laptop. When we're playing chess or playing a game, a board game, we think with the board, don't we? It's only the very exceptional chess players who can play chess without using a board. I saw a wonderful, I should have shown it to the students actually, I saw a wonderful YouTube video of Magnus Carlsen, the world chess champion. I've got to be careful talking about chess in India, right? I realize that. But for now, the world chess champion playing not just chess blindfold, but freestyle chess blindfold, right? You know freestyle chess where you start in a random way. Fantastic, amazing. I can't do that. I can't even remember what I've got to get in a supermarket. I have to write it down. That's, again, a material tool outsourcing some cognitive task. Just note that. A football manager using a diagram to show strategy. I mentioned this in the students' class. We used analog to digital converters. That's what these are. We measure a line, an analog thing, and we convert it into a number, digital. So analog digital converters are not new. They've been around for a long time. This is my home, and this is a shopping list. This is how my wife does stuff, right? She leaves a shopping list, right? And that means it has to be done. And then that box there is empty. But that is her, what do you call this? Stuff that she puts in her eyes because of the lenses that she uses, contact lenses. And it's some stuff that she has. She has all these materials in the bathroom, but this is something I recognize. You put it in the eye and it's supposed to do good things. But she leaves it there, right? That means that actually has content, that little pile. It means, Rick, you are going to shop. You're going to buy my contact fluid. You're also going to buy mayonnaise, garlic, and sill. I don't know what sill is in English. It's like this pickled fish that we eat in Sweden. So we use objects, don't we, to do that stuff. It's outsourcing memory task. In this case, this is outsourcing an instruction to the husband, right? So the husband here is a basic extension of the wife's sort of general organization. But you know, that's how things go, isn't it? I see it happening in Kavita's house all the time, you know. So a classical view of memory would be, look, we have memory inside our heads. So a mouse can walk a maze because it's got these special place cells in its brain. They're in the hippocampus. And that's the classical view. But I would argue that objects become part of our thinking because they're like external place cells. Right? Objects are doing the same function as certain things in our brain, but they're external to our body. Right? So functionally, they're equivalent. So if you're a functionalist, somebody who thinks that function determines, if you like, what's going on, then you have to say that when my wife puts that stuff on the shelf, that's like an external memory and a set of instructions for me. And this links a little bit into my research, and I don't really apologize for that, but I'm just saying that, you know, one thing we can look at this is that we do an action in the world that leaves a trace in the world, and that trace triggers further actions. That's exactly what's going on when we're writing an essay. It's exactly what's going on with the sculptor. I don't know whether you remember these either, right? But in Europe, we still have these in some places. It's a hotel room key. Why do you think it's so large? You don't lose it, exactly. And moreover, it's so large, you don't want to carry it around every day. So you give it to the concierge or the person at the reception to put up on the thing, which is what they want you to do. So it nudges you into good behavior, just the way the object is formed. I'm a bit of a train buff, so I really like this. This is an old train in England, and it's going along a single track. Now, you know, if you think about the logistics of single track working, you only want one train on that track, yeah? So what they do is they have this token, and you're only allowed to drive along that track if you have the token, and there's only one of them. Right? You don't make a spare one if you're doing this. Don't make a spare one. That's disaster. There's one token, and you can see the token being handed over. Now he can drive on the single track. Staying with railways, why not? In the old days before computers, when you've got a sort of layout like this with complicated switches or points, we call them in the English points, how do you stop it that two trains, you know, collide, or you get, you know, some sort of combination which is not allowed? Well, they made what they call frames with little notches. So you see these metal bars, and they've got little notches, which means that certain points can't be set when others are set. Again, it's like I would say this is an analog computer in a way, but it's a piece of material doing cognitive tasks. These are my favorite. So I grew up in this place just north of London, Letchworth, where they have at least the UK's first roundabout, and there it is, to the left. 1903, I think that was built. Here's a modern one in Holland. And think about roundabouts. Aren't they an amazing, it's just a physical object. But combined with the rules of driving means that drivers' self-interest of getting from A to B is converted into, let's say, the interests of the town planners, that it's a smooth intersection. So the rules of the road plus the material infrastructure produces this cooperation out of self-interest. So again, our behavior is being, at least some of our cognition is being outsourced into the environment here. And notice this is the Dutch roundabout, so you don't just have cars, but you have bicycles and you have pedestrians. And they're all interacting in a certain way. So the self-interested actions of the drivers, combined with the social norms for driving, plus the physical structure, produces what I call emergent group goals. The goals of the city planners, things like smooth action across the intersection. But it can go wrong. This is Swindon in the UK, and you should see people's faces when they first come to this roundabout. This is actually, as you can see, this is 5 roundabouts arranged in a large super roundabout. It's just crazy. I just showed you that for fun. I think town planners sometimes can go, I don't know whether they're trying to be aesthetic there, or whether they're trying to solve a mathematical problem, or they just want to make everybody annoyed. I'm not sure. But the written word on paper also, I know that Kanish here has my love of writing on good quality paper, and these are my notes to do with my research. And you can see, I mean, we're outsourcing, offshoring, I was going to say, we're outsourcing memory tasks, but we're also thinking with the page, aren't we, when we're writing notes? And there's an advantage to this kind of note, I would say. I'm looking a little bit at the students here. Because all the haptic feedback, when I write a letter R, it's never the same as the next letter R. I can do little drawings, I can make funny things, I can make connections. I don't have to be bound to some word processing tool. And I feel what it feels like against the paper. That's all enriching the memory. I think we lose a lot when we go away from note-taking on paper to something that's digital. And it's not just me that says this. I mean, there's a lot of research that shows that actually note-taking on paper is more effective. Think about the movements involved in doing that compared to writing and moving the pen around the paper, and feeling the paper, the sound of the paper. It's engaging far more in a way, and they're all contributing to the memory. I'm not saying one thing or the other. I'm just throwing this out there. My job is to get you questioning what you're doing and changing your mind, remember? I'm going to skip this, if you don't mind, because I'm worried about time. I might come back to it. But you can see, okay, very roughly speaking, you can see that Babylonian tablets, this is basic trigonometry being done by the Babylonians, and they are using marks on tablets to do the calculation. They're outsourcing the calculation from their heads onto the tablet, just like we do when we do calculations on a piece of paper. Again, we can't really do them in our heads, at least most of us can't. I can't really do those in my head if it's too long. So I do it on paper, and people are always amazed when people can do it in their heads. So the paper is adding to the cognition, isn't it? The paper is doing work. And here the tablet guys, they realized the tablet could do some work. They didn't have to remember everything. Similarly, probably the cave drawings, this is Ardèche in Ardèche, and probably, we don't know, of course, we don't know. This is what, 40,000 years ago, 35,000 years ago. But it's likely that this is performing some task that may be similar to memory. It might also be similar to something like a voucher. Imagine you've got a hunter-gatherer society, everybody's got to do their bit. How do you show that you've killed something today? Well, you can drag it in and show, the chief or whoever, I've done my bit. But you could also, at a certain point, you realize it's heavy. So instead of dragging the whole thing in, you have a representation of it. And it's much easier to manipulate representations than the actual animal itself. So this starts something happening, a whole beautiful ratcheted chain of going from representation to representation to a world now where we live in massively representation. Most of the stuff we do is with representations, not with real things. Even when it comes to bank balance, our bank balance is a representation. Hopefully it's a bit real, right? But when we go to the bank, we can get money out, but it's a representation. That's all it is. As we said to the students, the bank lends out your money, right? So the bank doesn't have your money. How do you know you have that money in the bank? Well, because there's a representation of it. So this is maybe the start of it. I don't know. I don't know enough about the history of it, and I don't think anybody does. Similarly, this. So this is probably, I don't know, BCE 1600, they think. They don't really know. But this is Knossos and the Mycenaean Royal Palace. And this is the Linear B tablets in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. And if you look carefully at that tablet, you see things like, the chariot wheels. How many chariots it has. There's swords, meaning how many swords does the palace own. So this is in the inventory, keeping tracks on the assets of the palace. And there will be scribes who can understand this. So they're like civil servants. And imagine their social status, right? They can read and write this stuff. Other people, including the high-ups, can't. So they are a privileged class. You see how a material tool here has given rise to some social divisions and some social stratification. How technology has changed the structure of society, even in these times. Yeah, so again, just think about objects, material things, and how that may have a causal effect on the structure of society. In London, where I come from, we have taxi drivers, they drive these black taxis. And they have to learn 60,000 streets within 6 miles of Charing Cross. It's called the knowledge. They do a test then, and they have to say how they would drive from one place to another place. It's called calling a run. And they go around in little scooters memorizing London. And not just the streets, but the position of every shop, every flower stall, every church, because you never know what the customer might want. And that took 6 years, roughly, to learn that. And it was very interesting that the hippocampus of those taxi drivers was extended, which is where you do this place memory, just like in rats. So those taxi drivers had different heads, basically. What is the hippocampus? Well, it's physical. It's material, right? So they're extending their material substance here because they're having to remember extra roads. And then comes along GPS. And you can imagine what happens then. And it's called mini cabs. They're not allowed to call themselves taxis. They are mini cabs. And there's massive problems between the two groups. The GPS driver he'd probably never been to London before. His GPS tells him everything. And we can think about what kind of knowledge they have. So the taxi driver, you could argue he has quite robust knowledge. If something happens, he's involved in a crash or whatever, he can still navigate around London. GPS guy, if the satellite goes down, he is lost. So you could say, well, they both have knowledge, but they're different kinds of knowledge, aren't they? Something different is happening there. With the GPS driver, think about it, that's also material. There's satellites. It's just outsourcing the cognitive task. And notice also that the taxi driver is an expert, but the GPS driver is not. So the technology has downgraded the level of expertise. Just keep that in mind when you're thinking about ChatGPT. We don't want any technology to take away the cognitive task. We want the technology to do the rubbish stuff that we don't want to do. Mow the lawn. Write a list of things. Do a calculation. We don't want the technology to do the creative things that we teachers do. We don't want technology to do the wonderful magic that we hopefully do in the classroom. Just keep that in mind, yeah? So I think it is a direct analogy to the situation with the Mycenaeans, that if you are able to manipulate the object in the correct way, you have a certain amount of power. So that group of scribes who are writing down all the objects in the empire, those people who were scribes and they were taking the inventories, of course they had power. They could make it that there weren't as many chariots as there already were, and take one of the chariots away. There could be corruption. There are all sorts of things they could do. They had a lot of power because of that material tool. These guys also had a lot of power because they knew how to use the tool. I've mentioned this already, yes, sorry, I got ahead of myself. And then, of course, think of what happens when we have a tool like the printing press. Suddenly, we don't have to copy knowledge, character by character in illuminated texts. Suddenly, with a printing press, that knowledge can be available at a fraction of the price, a really small fraction of the price. Something big happens in terms of the access to knowledge at this point because of this material tool. And we can think about the internet as simply being an extension of this in some ways. Now, not everybody was allowed to read. We mentioned that just now. So think about medieval Europe. Mainly men, and men associated with the sort of existing power structures, which was largely the church and the state. But still, it was a little bit more easy to get access. We think about the internet as being an extension of that. And in the year 11 class, I asked the students, do they know what these are, these different things? And I also said to them, and I'll say it to you, that probably you've used one of these hundreds of times over the last few hours, or maybe over the last few days. But everybody knows about Google, Netflix, the services that use the internet, but nobody knows about who owns the internet. But these guys own it. So they own the physical structure of the internet. And they're the ones who give permission to the services like Google and Netflix to use their infrastructure. Now, I don't want to sound conspiratorial here, but I just want to say that the internet is a physical thing. I talk to my students and they think the internet is some abstract thing. No, the internet is a physical thing owned by people. And those people give permission to use it or not. Yeah, so again, a material tool that has got gatekeeping implications. I'm going to skip that. Which takes me, in a rather roundabout way, back to TOK. So in the TOK, we have the TOK exhibition, where the students have to choose 3 objects that are related to knowledge. And I hope that you see from this talk that pretty much all knowledge is related to objects, right? So it shouldn't be too difficult to find objects that are related to knowledge. So I made a little exhibition. When we give students things to do, we try and do them ourselves, don't we? So I made an exhibition of 3 objects. The first is a photograph of Wells Cathedral, and this is the window. And I have to link that to a prompt. And the prompt is, how important are material tools in the production or acquisition of knowledge? And I think those of you who are TOK teachers, I think this is an easy access prompt, right? This is a good prompt for students who are having some trouble with TOK, because it tells you what to do. It tells you you're going to find material tools and then assess their importance in the production or acquisition of knowledge. And I'd say technically, for those who are TOK teachers, when it says production or acquisition, they can use both, right? That's all right. It's not an exclusive or. So, first one, I'm going to say something like, this is medieval church. Despite the printing press, most people in West Somerset, where this cathedral is, cannot read and write. But Christianity requires that they have certain knowledge of dogma of Christianity. What do they believe? And if you can't read and write, how do you get that knowledge over? Well, you use what we call in education a visual aid, don't you? And there's the visual aid, this wonderful stained glass window, depicting biblical scenes and showing the importance of them. My second object is from the Marshall Islands. Again, it's a photo from National Geographic, but I once showed this to somebody in a workshop who's from the Marshall Islands, and he was able to explain to me a little bit how it works. This is used as, again, a sort of visual aid, but it's a model this time. It's actually three-dimensional. It's made of little wooden sticks. And that is to help the navigator of a canoe to learn to navigate. Don't ask me to explain everything, but in there are star positions, winds, and tides. And all of those are used by the navigator to navigate these thousands of kilometers of unsignposted oceans. They didn't have maps, and they didn't have compasses, but they didn't need them. And they have a very interesting way of thinking about navigation, which is the canoe is thought of as being still. And it's the landscape that moves. And they have to make the landscape move in a certain way. You know, the background and the stars and so on. They have to make that move in a certain way. And I think it's really interesting because it's very successful. And it's an example for me of local knowledge. Yeah? It's not this sort of global, generalized knowledge that we perhaps teach at school, but this is local knowledge, and it's knowledge, it works, it does what it should do. I don't think it's map-like. It's possibly more like story knowledge, right? So it's that different kind of knowledge. So I think it's very interesting to have that as an object. And the third object is the one I told you about before. So this is just an example of showing how not only do we think with objects, but we know with objects, and the students can then use those objects as part of their TOK exhibition. And it leads me back to our questions. I should say really that the TOK syllabus has evolved over the last years. I think it's moved far more in its material direction. I pushed it a little bit there, I have to be honest. I thought we've over-intellectualized education. We think of knowledge in the head far too much, which is why the whole, you see the theme, you see what I've been keep on going on about. External, things are happening outside in the real world materially. They're not happening in here. Well, they are, but that's not the only thing that's happening. It's the interaction between what's in here and the external world that matters. It matters how you set out your classroom. Lots of research on that. How you set out your classroom will determine how students think. Why? Because they're thinking with their environment. They are thinking with their environment. Should we go back to those puzzles? So, what is the difference then? I heard what you said, and I think you were on the right lines. I don't know the answer, but I want to suggest the answer because these were taken from an interesting paper by two educational psychologists called Barab and Plucker, and they were talking, the title of their paper was Smart Environments, Not Smart Students. So where's the smart environment here then, in the shop where they're selling these things? Well, I would argue it's the material objects that they are selling are a little bit like an abacus. They're using those material objects to do calculations with. And we do it, don't we? I mean, I remember in the old days, going to a shop, and they were weighing something, and they would weigh it with these different weights, and they would add the weights up. And how would they add the weights up? Well, they were actual weights, so they could see what they were adding up. I remember when we actually used money, right? In Sweden, we don't use money anymore, but actual money, and how somebody counted money, and they did it positionally. They placed money positionally on the counter in a certain way to do the calculation. I remember how, no, far be it that I will be in a pub, but if I were in a pub, the barman doing a complex order would place the glasses, the right glass near the right position in the bar, again, to remember the order, and probably to do the addition as well, using the objects to help them do the addition. What does that teach us then? It teaches that these guys can do maths better because they're using objects to do it for them. So why on earth do we get them to do this abstract stuff in maths class in school? And it sounds as though I'm being aggressive here towards maths teachers. I'm not. I'm one of them. But there's a reason why we do that. Obviously, there's a good reason for it. And I go back to what was said over there at the back and to what the gentleman sort of hinted at over here. We do it because of generality. That's why we use concepts. We want students to learn high-level skills that can apply to hundreds, if not millions, if not trillions of different situations, not just one. Now that's a laudable and noble aim, but we have just to keep an eye on the fact that why do we want to do that? In some situations, I think the local, specific thing is enough. If you want to be a really good high jumper, like this wonderful Swedish guy, you've got to be good at high jump. That's what you do. It's one single thing. So you don't have to learn the generality. And in life, it's good to have transferable skills, absolutely. We don't know what the future is going to bring. But there are also going to be situations where you need to be good at one thing. You need to be good at interacting with the material world in a certain way. And that is where we have to not just assume that the intellectual way is the best way, but actually, firstly, help our own teaching by using objects. Help our students by using objects. Make sure our classrooms have got objects in them. And the students are not just sitting there examining their own brains. But secondly, laying out our classrooms so the students can interact in a good way. Thirdly, we use objects ourselves to teach with. And the objects can be simple things like diagrams. I mean, they don't have to be material objects, but I do think that material objects have a lot to say, to be said for them. If we're teaching history, why do we not bring historical objects into the classroom? If we're teaching, about the arts, I mean, it's obvious you can have artistic objects around. I can't imagine doing an art lesson without artistic objects. Of course, in woodwork and metalwork and those other practical subjects, it's all about objects. But for some reason, we don't think of that as being real knowledge, do we? And that's strange, because it is real knowledge. And of course, the sports teacher is the one that I'm really addressing here, because sport and music, because they can't do their thing without objects. And that, I would say, is the most basic kind of knowledge. And when I say basic, I don't mean low. I mean, you need that knowledge first before you can do other knowledge. As we saw, those representations only came in relatively recently in human history. So let's not forget about objects. Let's not forget about knowing how to do things, because actually everything else depends on those. I haven't mentioned ChatGPT, and I think I will leave it out now, but I just want to say thank you all very much. Am I allowed 5 more minutes for questions or not? She's a strict timekeeper. No? Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
If a GDP was to be calculated by thinkers that we have in our country, or if they has, taking cue from the cognitive archaeology. I love that term in one of your slides. I think what we all have to look at is cognitive economy. How do we leverage it? And how do we keep knowledging? That's what you said in the beginning. I wish it was knowledging, not knowledge by itself. So thank you so much to Rick Seams. Please give a big round of applause. So the theory of knowledging is something that, a concept that we'll take from his keynote. And I hope Dr. Cyrus Vakil, who's sitting here, will come up with a draft on DP dilemma. Okay? So Mahesh, Rajesh, can I ask you to